Good evening and welcome to everyone joining us for this Friday's talk to kill a breadwinner. This discussion today will deal with the recent amendment to the Karnataka Land Forms Act and the serious dilution of some of its most salient provisions. Today's discussion will also be the first in a series of discussions that seek to understand why there are concerted efforts to dilute some of the most important aspects of legislation today. Today's discussion will also be the first in a series of discussions that seek to understand. But before we start with today's discussion, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Reach Lawyer to you. Simply put, we are a network of lawyers concerned about the rule of law, constitutional morality, and the future of this country. Reach Lawyer is a legal training and support initiative for civil rights movements, social activists, and individuals to empower them with legal knowledge. While the core of our activity revolves around our work with the legal fraternity, we also undertake various other initiatives to further legal awareness, social legal advocacy, and most significantly, perhaps, we collaborate with various human rights groups and grassroots organizations across the country. To know more about us, you can look us up at www.reachlawyer.org. Before we begin with today's discussion, I'd like to share the performance of a poem by the renowned Ali Sardar Jafri, titled Kaun Azad Hua. This performance was recently by the Afwan Project by one Ved Sinha. Apologies, I think we had a slight technical glitch. I'm just going to share a small poem that's been performed, a poem of Ali Sardar Jafri's that was performed recently by the Afwan Project.
तो पहले जो टुकड़ियां रात के अंधेरे में नजर रखती थी हम पर, आज खुले बाजार घूमती हैं नंगी तलवारें लिए। कि जहां कुछ नया कुछ अलग होता दिखे, ध्वस्त कर दो उस पूरे इतिहास को और दफन कर दो मारे गए हर शहीद की लाश को। नाम दे बदनाम कर दो ताकि सबका सर झुके, चुप करा दो आज लाठी देख भी जो ना रुके। और रंग ना हो मन का मेरे, वहीं रंग दो चार को, इस पूरे विश्व में बस मेरी ही जयकार हो, बस मेरी ही जयकार। कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी, कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी। मेरे सीने में अभी दर्द है महकूमों का, मादरे हिंद के चेहरे पे उदासी है वही। कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी, कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी। खंजर आजाद है सीने में उतरने के लिए, वर्दी आजाद है बेगुनाह पे सितम के लिए। मौत आजाद है लाशों पे गुजरने के लिए। कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी, कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी। काले बाजार में बदशक्ल चुड़ैलों की तरह कीमतें काली दुकानों में खड़ी रहती है। हर खरीदार की जेबों को कतरने के लिए। कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी, कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी। कारखानों में लगा रहता है सांस लेती हुई लाशों का हुजूम, साथ में उनके खड़ी रहती है बेकारी भी, अपने खूंखार दहन खोले हुए। कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी, कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी। रोटियां चकले की कहवाए हैं जिनको सरमाए के दलालों ने नफाखोरी के झरोखों में सजा रखा है। बालियां दान की गेहूं के सुनहरे गोशे मिस्र यूनान के मजबूर गुलामों की तरह अजनबी देश के बाजार में बिक जाते हैं। कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी, कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी। मेरे सीने में अभी दर्द है महकूमों का, मादरे हिंद के चेहरे पे उदासी है वही। कौन आजाद हुआ किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी। कौन आजाद हुआ, किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी। कौन आजाद हुआ, किसके माथे से गुलामी की सियाही छूटी।
Hello, and I think I need to start by apologizing for the technological glitch. Seems like technology will fail you when you most need it. But to start off with today's discussion, uh, we've heard of the slogan "Land to the Tiller." It's a slogan that was popularized by the former Chief Minister of Karnataka, the late and memorable Devraj Ars, when he instituted land reforms in the 70s. This seems like an idea that should be fairly uncontroversial, but indeed has never been so. Throughout much of our history, we have seen extremely feudal and oppressive systems of land ownership and tenancy in Karnataka. The zamindari system has always benefited from the oppression of small and marginal farmers in the state, who actually constitute a majority of the farming sector. The Karnataka Land Reforms Act, that was instituted in 1961, since its inception has faced strong resistance from dominant landowning communities who stood against its progressive efforts to bring about rural empowerment through land redistribution. It was as late, in fact, as 1974 that amendments were brought to the Act to ensure greater enforcement and to do away with these oppressive systems. While the objectives of the Land Reforms Act have indeed been commendable, consistent and at times violent resistance to the Act has limited its capacity to reduce the scourge of landlessness in Karnataka. Having said that, it is also important to note that despite the issues that continue to plague the Act today, the sweeping changes that were brought through the Land Reforms Act were able, in some proportion, to break the stranglehold of the powerful landowning communities and also strive to build greater equality and to empower small and regional and marginal farmers in the state of Karnataka. The key aspects of the Land Reforms Act and its significance has been debated at some length. But what is shocking today is that a lot of these provisions that form the soul of the Land Reforms Act have been completely undermined by the recent amendments to the Karnataka Land Reforms Act. It's perhaps not surprising then that in this climate of intolerance and suppression of dissent, these sweeping changes were introduced through the back door, through an ordinance at that, without any consultation, either in a legislative capacity or consultation of the millions of farmers who stand to lose their livelihoods by virtue of these changes. With that, I'd like to introduce our two guests today. To begin with, we have with us Reach Lawyers founder, Mr. B.T. Venkatesh, who's also a former state public prosecutor for the state of Karnataka. His association with rights based advocacy and litigation has been for the better part of the past few decades. And I think that requires very little introduction. But some of the work he's done has ranged from work on child rights to labor rights to work with the transgender community in the state and a host of other issues that have plagued us, particularly in the space of human rights today. We are also joined by Ms. Chukki Nanjunaswamy, who again needs very little introduction. She has been one of the most prominent faces and one of the fiercest critiques of governments when it has come to issues concerning farmers' rights and environmental issues in the state. She has been associated with an organization that has been extremely prominent and historic in farmers' agitation and has led the movement for the better part of the last few decades, which is the Karnataka Raja Raita Sangha. I'm pleased that she's joining us today. She is also currently a chair of the Amrita Bhumi Agroecological Training Center. They engage in research and initiatives with regard to dealing and sort of handling some of the agrarian crisis that we're faced with today. So I'd like to just start off by welcoming both of them. And I think if I can hand it over to Venkatesh sir to just start off today's discussion and introduce these amendments, discuss these amendments, the history of the Karnataka Land Reforms Act, and why it's important for all of us to discuss these changes that are attacking some of these extremely important safeguards. Sir, can you hear me?
Sure. I can hear you.
Yes.
Start the video. Yeah. Hello?
Hi,
Yes.
sir.
Yeah. Hi. So very good evening. Welcome to Friday Talk Show. Today we are talking in terms of to kill a breadwinner. Why we keep this title? In fact, today you heard the song Kaun Azad Hua, who became independent in this country. When we have such kind of regimes which have always tried to see that how to take away the rights of the people. In fact, this is something which is writ large in our history. In fact, one of the efforts that was done in the last 200 years of struggle for land reforms was that extraordinary achievement of Mysore state or the Karnataka state. It was rechristened in 1972 by the Rajaras, where they brought an amendment to Karnataka Land Reforms Act, which was something revolutionary in its aspect is concerned. In fact, it was such a revolution, no one expected it to happen in a state ruled by Congress, said to be persons belonging to feudal community hold the leadership in the Congress party. Given that the kind of amendment that were brought were such changes which made it possible a large extent of tillers who were cultivating lands as tenants to become owners. Millions got occupancy rights for the lands. Land to the tiller was something which was promised long before, way back in 1950, but was seeing a degree of realization in Karnataka by this amendment of 1974. Karnataka Land Reforms Act amendment in 1974 was such a revolution. In fact, the act was challenged, the amendments were challenged, the number of persons claimed that they did not have the excess land. In fact, there used to be almost a not less than 1 million litigation in our own high courts regarding the challenging this particular acquisition. The kind of institute change that were brought into this particular law were many. The basic thing which I would like to impress upon is that agricultural land shall be agricultural land and it shall not be converted for any other purpose other than for agriculture. One, that was the first change. The second change, except an agriculturist, no one else can own an agricultural land, was the second revolutionary change that was brought into it. Third, that not a person who is not an agriculturist can acquire an agricultural land, was the third revolutionary concept which came into existence. Fourth, that no company, no institution, none of them can acquire lands, agricultural lands, was the fourth change which was brought into it. The kind of amendments that were brought into the law made it that agricultural lands are protected from acquisition by anyone who is not doing agricultural activity. This was something very important. And that change made possible something, another step which happened, that was ceiling limit. That in fact, until then, a family could hold up to 400 acres of land, and that was restricted to 1/4 of a dry agricultural land. And in fact, the irrigated land was reduced to a much smaller extent, which happened. And this was that change which revolutionized the land holdings. And second most important thing, which was the most important change that was brought into this particular law, was that no more tenancy. That tenanted lands cannot exist anymore in the state of Karnataka. There cannot be leasehold rights of a land, agricultural land in Karnataka. Every tenant is an occupant. If he was, as on the given day, an occupant, he would be there as the owner. He would be granted occupancy right. All that he need to do was submit a form in a form number 7, is very famous number, form number 7, that changed the nature of land holding in the state. In fact, today, Karnataka state boasts of largest number of small landholders, which was a revolution of its kind. And the kind of laws which were brought into Karnataka Land Reforms Act helped the government to bring in another change, another revolutionary change, that was Prohibition of Transfer of Certain Lands Act. This Prohibition of Transfer of Certain Lands Act made it possible that no land sold by a person belonging to a scheduled caste and scheduled tribe would be valid. It declared all such transaction void, and the land would be taken over by the government and redistributed to persons deserving from the community. So in a way, these Land Reforms Act brought in such change which made agriculture in this state as primary. In fact, Karnataka is not the very well-known state for its kind of agriculture is concerned, and therefore the kind of development that have taken place beyond that, because of this kind of change that were brought into law, was whether it is Krishna Jalabhagya Nigama, the kind of with the Almaty Dam that we came into, and so many other irrigation dams that have come, reservoirs that have come into Karnataka. Larger extent of land is now irrigated than what it was when the Karnataka land reforms came into existence. Lands have become valuable. Now, this has brought in such a change that a marginal farmer, a farmer having small holdings, can make a decent living, can have a decent livelihood with that small part of land. In fact, many of these tenants could get some 4 acres, 5 acres of land, some of them to the extent of 3 acres of land. But the 3 acres was more than sufficient for them to survive, to make a decent living in the state. So this was some change which revolutionized the whole construct of land holdings in Karnataka. Was the first time it happened? No, it did not. It was not the first time it happened. The entire construct of land reforms was introduced in Karnataka long before. It was way back in the 1770s, during the period of Tipu Sultan. He introduced the land reforms, land to the soldiers. Whoever was a soldier who could be part of the state's army, he was entitled to grant of land. In fact, that practice is even as on this day, even in Indian Army today, that a person, soldier who retires from the service of the army, would be asked whether he is seeking for an application. He can make an application for grant of land. A grant of land would be given to him in his native place. This is something which is a practice going on from 1770s onwards, right from Tipu Sultan times. During Nalvadi Krishnaraj Vadiyar's time, the changes were being brought in to say that some amount of land is secured for these people. In fact, we have long list of history regarding land reforms and Land Reforms Act in Karnataka. 1961 was the threshold change that was brought into Karnataka Land Reforms Act. That act, while it tried to introduce the kind of changes which are existing now, fell short of it, wherein that the landlord gentry, the people who are large landholders, controlled the assembly and restricted the holdings. In fact, the reduction of the land holding could not happen in 1961. That changed. That change was brought into 1974 amendment, a revolutionary change. Now, what exactly the change that we are talking in terms? In the last few decades, there have been such amount of efforts to kill this particular law, but it continues to be holding its fort. Now, during this particular COVID times, when everybody is in distress, the entire state is in distress, the farming community is in distress. Today, Ms. Chukki will be with us to explain the same much in detail. Farmers are in severe distress because they are unable to transport, harvest, to do any kind of activity with the kind of challenges they had faced in this time. Now, given such situation, you bring in the change that anybody can buy this agricultural land. You bring in a change the kind of change that a non-agriculturist can buy an agricultural land. You bring in a change that a institution can buy a land, a company can make an application to buy a land. If we were to look into this particular law, I am not going to the legal details regarding the same, for simple reason that the laws which existed, the conditions which I told you in the first instance, which it restricted, have been done away with this amendment, just done away with this amendment. By virtue of this amendment, the entire law related to Land Reforms Act goes to pre-61 days. Pre-61 days. That makes this law virtually killing the whole construct of land reforms in the state. There is no more land reforms at all in this particular state. When we have been agitating, the people have been agitating for regularization of the Bagar Hukum lands, that's the lands which are being cultivated by people without there being proper title deeds. We have been seeking for regularization of the same. At that juncture, you bring in a law of this nature. And this is done by an ordinance, as was stated by Saurabh. This was not an act which was debated in the assembly, legislative assembly. This was not an act which was sent for public hearing, because this is something which needs to be heard. And you are forsaking the rights of millions of farmers in the state. And that kind of thing is being done without there being even a proper notice. This is something which is a shocker. Why this happens? In fact, I see 3 to 4 kind of statements that are coming in. In fact, I was reading the papers, various newspapers, magazines, and articles, the law magazines, and all of them, and they were talking in terms of talking in terms of taking away this kind of amendment, bringing out this kind of amendment was something which was beneficial for the state, or the statement made by them. In fact, I don't know where they come with this beneficial statement. In fact, companies welcomed this kind of amendment. The state authority said that this is a revolutionary change we are bringing in. In fact, one of the ministers said that, henceforth people need not go to other state to buy agricultural land. They can buy agricultural land here. Now, one moot question which I would like to say, who is going to sell the land? Let me tell you who is going to benefit in this particular process. The first one who is going to benefit is going to be the rich landlords who are holding money and power which they hold. They will be acquiring the land. In fact, their holdings would become larger. It is for their benefit this amendment is being brought in. The reason why this amendment is being brought in is for the purpose of consolidation of the power of the politicians. Consolidation of the power of the politicians. This is also a factor that in the rural atmosphere, the persons who hold power, the political power, are able to grab much larger lands. Third is going to be one of the most cruel change which is going to happen is that the kind of times that we are going through, when the entire economy is in severe distress, when people don't have any finances, their even surviving has become a difficult at this point of time. Now, at this juncture, this amendment is brought. The people are in distress. There will be phenomenal amount of distress sales that's going to happen. That distress sales would be substantially lower rate than what the land is, and the people are going to lose out. In fact, there will be some time to come where the people are going to be coolies in their own lands. This is going to be the future of this particular state. This is going to the situation which this state is being driven to. While everybody, when law firms, everyone are making claim that this is going to be a very good law which is going to come in, it is going to be a death knell for the farmer who wins bread for you, who makes food for, produces food for you. You survive on that, and virtually you're killing him. It's like to kill a breadwinner. That is the reason we titled this particular program. To kill a breadwinner is this particular law. This chief minister who had claimed that he had come to power for the betterment of farming community, and he swears by the name of farming community, how could he pass such a law which is going to kill the entire farming community? That something makes it really shocking. Today, I'm going to play a song, a small sequence of a film of Bimal Rai called Do Bhiga Zameen, which aptly describes the present scenario and the scenario to come in few days to come. That would be very, very clear. The way the sharks are going to get into the land, the way the loan which is going to kill the farmer, the way he is going to be a stranger in his own land is by this particular climate. The end of this movie, with the scene which is shown is extraordinary. We are showing that particular clip today for your view. That would clearly demonstrate what this change is going to bring into us and be a death knell for the farmers of Karnataka. Thank you.
शंभू महतो ने कर्ज की रकम अदा नहीं की, बल्कि वो अपनी बीवी और बच्चों को लेकर यहाँ से फरार हो गया। उसका बूढ़ा बाप गंगू महतो जो यहाँ है पागल हो गया है, लिहाजा मजबूर होकर उसकी जायदाद तो जमीन नीलाम करनी पड़ रही है। नीलाम करोगे? करो, जरूर करो। हमें घर से बाहर कर दिया तो इससे क्या हुआ? ये घर बहुत छोटा था, अब हमें बहुत बड़ा घर मिल गया है। सारी पृथ्वी ही हमारा घर हो गई। वो ऊपर नीला आसमान हमारी छत का काम देगा।
धुआं उठ रहा है ना, ठीक वहीं पर अपना मकान था और वहां मेरी रसोई थी। चलो माँ, चलो बापू, अब चले।
हाँ, चलो। क्या उठाता है? दिखा क्या उठाया है?
कुछ नहीं भाई, कुछ नहीं।
चोर कहीं का, कुछ नहीं। क्या दिखा, क्या चुराया है? दिखा। भाग यहाँ से, भाग।
Yeah, I think that video basically from that movie basically just sort of echoes this idea that the owner cultivator then becomes a laborer in his own land. And I just like to thank Sir for the introduction, just contextualizing what exactly it means to have these amendments in place and what exactly the consequences of some of that are, especially given the kind of history that this act has had. I'd now like to ask Chuki ma'am to maybe just start us off on what is the current situation with regard to the agrarian crisis and farmer distress in the state, and how the proposed, I mean, rather the amendments to this act can exacerbate this problem. Ma'am, I think you could just start us off?
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me for today's talk. It's actually very difficult to, frame my thoughts and talk about this issue, especially after watching this last scene of Do Biga Zameen. Well, thank you so much for Mr. Peter Venkatesh for giving such a wide introduction and such a wide overview on the history of the Land Reforms Act of Karnataka and the amendments that has been brought into. We have been hearing different opinions from different sections of the society. For sure, there is no doubt for the farming community from the point of view of a small farmer who constitute the largest section of Karnataka and who are mostly the rain-fed farmers. There's no doubt that this is going to be a disastrous one for them. But for when the government announced these amendments, immediately the next day, the media carried interviews of people from the farming community, people from the Confederation of Indian Industries, and those who were celebrating these amendments were clearly people from the Confederation of Indian Industries and many companies and many capitalists in that sense. So that was very clear the day after itself that these amendments were brought for whose benefit. Sadly, it's all happening in the name of development. Sadly, it's all happening in the name of upliftment of the farming community. But they have a very clear agenda to uproot the farming community from the villages. They have killed, the weavers. They have killed the other sectors which who were there in our villages. But the only one who have been surviving in our villages are the farming community alone. So the support system that a farmer had and an agriculturist had in the past, everything has been one by one has been destroyed. And all these things have started just after the so-called new economic policy, which was brought into this country by joining the World Trade Organization in the early 90s. And we had P.V. Narasimha Rao as our Prime Minister and Mr. Manmohan Singh as the Finance Minister. And they did the same mistake without discussing in the parliament, without having a basic debate among the parliamentarians. They went to sign the World Trade Organization. And it was then the farmers' movement of Karnataka joined hands with the other farmers' movements across India. And lately, it also played a major role in building a global movement of farmers internationally to fight against this monstrous WTO. At that time, our issues were, stop dumping of, agricultural products from the rich countries, the so-called developed countries, to Indian markets, and to increase the quantitative restrictions on the imports. At the same time, we also were, engaged in the fight against the trade-related intellectual property rights on the seeds, on the knowledge systems. At that time, land was not really a crucial issue. But when we had joined hands with the movements from Southern American countries, from African countries. The kind of issues, the farmers would bring up on the international, tables, that, for them, the basic fight was for their land. They were people from Brazil, people from, Bolivia, from Ecuador. They were talking about what kind of, agrarian reform they were fighting for in their countries. And they were into land occupation movements. And when we were hearing those fights, we in Indian, as Indian farmers, we always felt that we were in a better situation. We were granted land, especially farmers from Karnataka, because of this beautiful land reforms act that we have had. We always felt that we were blessed. We were blessed to have such a chief minister. And I would like to clarify that it was not only because of the chief minister, but there was a long struggle behind that. The Kagodu Satyagraha, the land to the tiller movement, the socialist movement, which led, that gave a push for the chief minister to come up with such a revolutionary act. And who could even think of in the 1970s a law which ensures, which guarantees the land rights to the tilling community, to the people who work on the land. And these are the people who believed in equality, who believed in establishing a society without hierarchy, economical hierarchy, and so on. But we were always afraid whenever we heard our friends speaking from Brazil and other countries that maybe this, what will happen if, if we have to fight for our land again. And in not more than a decade, all this used to happen, but in a very short span of time, when Mr. Modi became the Prime Minister, he wanted to bring a similar ordinance to the land acquisition and rehabilitation law at the center. And at that time, that was an effort from the previous government. And there has been a long pressure from the social movements, from the people's movements across India. And there were large alliances were built together with the National Alliance of People's Movement, led by Ms. Medha Patkar, and so many other groups. And at the center, in Delhi, we had many protests and so on. But when actually Mr. Modi came, he wanted to bring in such a anti-farmer law in the name of development through an ordinance. And this enacting a law through an ordinance is a very, very typical of the BJP government, when it comes to both the center or the state. So when it comes to state, what I've heard is that I have not studied much about the Land Reforms Act of other states, but what I've heard from experts that if you relax the Land Reforms Act of Karnataka, then it will be easy to relax in other states very easily. So that's why Karnataka plays a very major role in protecting the rights of the small farmers to their land. And see what happened during COVID. COVID was such a sudden situation. Nobody knew how to deal with the situation. But the farming community, they were, as our national poet Rashtra Kavi Kuvempu says, whatever happens, he doesn't care. She doesn't care. They just go on tilling. They go on working on the land. So they were just continuing to work on the land. When their harvest was ready, there was no, because of lockdown, there was no marketing system in place. There was nobody to purchase the products, the agriculture products. There was no transport system, all kinds of borders were locked. Sometimes the village borders were locked and taluka borders were locked. Interstate borders were locked for a long time. So, Green Revolution has taught farmers to grow single crops for a market which is far away, which they don't even know. Some trader comes and buys it. So this is how the Green Revolution has taught. So this is exactly why, the farmers were also stuck during the lockdown. The government actually had to intervene in a proper way. They tried a little bit, but it did not really work everywhere. The farmers who had actually grown vegetables, fruits, and flowers, the perishable items, they were in a great distress. I have seen the members of KRRS, of my organization, destroying the crop by plowing the land. They have run their tractors on their cabbage, on their cauliflowers, on their capsicum, from Chamarajnagar to Kolar to Belgaum. And this is what we have been seeing through social media. But this was not visible to our beloved Chief Minister. Very sadly, he wore the same green shawl, and whenever he becomes a Chief Minister, he takes the oath by wearing the same green shawl in the name of a farmer. But what they did actually was all sorts of laws, the amendments that they brought into the APMC Act, Essential Commodities Act, or the Land Reforms Act. They were all anti-farmers. It is in another 10 years of time, it's very difficult to imagine our country with small farmers. Whereas, FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, they every year they come up with a report and they say that 80% of the food at the global level comes even today from the small farmers. Who are actually working on the land, not the corporate agriculture, not from the big landlords. But at the same time, the same report says that 800 million people in the world every day, go to bed with empty stomach. And these are the same people who work on the land. So what does it show? So this shows very clearly that there is something seriously wrong in our policy. That they know that the policies are definitely not in favor of the majority of the population when it comes to our own country or in the world. The whole world is going towards a system which is led by the capitalists, which is led by by a model which is called as neoliberal model. But in COVID, we have seen how a capitalistic system has collapsed. And whoever survived were those who could grow their own food, who were there in the villages. All those people who had left villages, we call them as agrarian refugees of agrarian crisis, who had left villages and who had gone to the cities to build to find, some sort of a livelihood, to feed their daily necessities or daily bread and butter. All of them had to come back. We have seen, lakhs of migrant workers walking back to their villages. So that was, that showed, just after 2-3 days of the lockdown announcement, that showed where was the real India. What was the real India? Was it there in the balconies or on the land and in the streets, in the working class? So this is a very crucial time for all of us. And in this sense, I should really thank Reach Lawyer, because we always felt, I was born and grew up together with the Farmers Movement of Karnataka. And I remember every October 2nd in Kaban Park, whenever we used to have the state conventions, me as a young girl used to get stuck in the traffic trying to reach Kaban Park. And there used to be a huge traffic jam because of the lakhs of people who had come from rural areas to Bangalore. they used to take a procession to assemble in Kabban Park. And I have heard as a growing child how the urban people react to it. Who are these dirty people coming here? What do they want? And without having any minimum sensibility, without even thinking that the breakfast they had in the morning was actually grown by the same dirty people. And this lockdown, we saw how the people started asking for product, food grown by the farmers to send it to their apartments and so on. And we were hopeful that at least now maybe this situation will open up their mind. No, it's really a great effort what you're doing to talk to the middle class and the educated lawyers. There are very few lawyers left who can actually advocate for the rights of the people. In Karnataka, we have a handful of them, and Mr. B.T. Venkatesh is one of them. And I'm so happy that he's investing on many young lawyers to build a lawyers community to stand for the working class, for the working section of the society. So having said all these things, this is definitely a time to to build bridges, and the land is something, it's not a battle of farmer alone. Let's be clear on this. Land is not just a battle of farmer alone. We need support. Farmers need support from all sections of the society. The youth have to stand. The urban young people have to stand in the name of farmers. The other middle class people, they all have to stand in the name of with the support, in the support of farmers, because otherwise food will definitely come, agriculture will go on, but agriculture will happen without people. So will this model work in India? It can work in countries where there's no population, where there are no hands. But this is a country where even today the majority of the people who are depending on agriculture for their livelihood. So is it possible to uproot them and send where? Where is the solution? Where is when Mr. Jairam Ramesh was the rural development minister, we in the delegation had gone and met him not to bring in the amendments to the Land Acquisition and the Rehabilitation Act at the center. And he was only talking about urbanization. So we were confused whether he was a minister for rural development or urban development. So, so no matter which government they are, which party they are, they all think the same, and no one is there for the farming community. They only remember every 5 years when they want vote. Otherwise, I mean, how is it possible in an independent country like in India? Even today, after so many years of independence, we don't have a minimum support price declared for, fairly calculated and declared for all the commodities, all the agricultural products, and there is no legal measure. There is no statutory measure on this. How is it possible? When there are basic issues have not been addressed in agriculture, now they want to snatch the land, which is the only sense of security which a farmer has, from the farming community, and give it to the so-called the new generation of farmers who are coming back to agriculture, the software professionals or whosoever. How is it possible? Will they actually produce food for this for the food security of this country? Even today, if at all we are eating full meals, we have to thank a farmer. He is selling it below his cost of production. If you actually calculate the cost of production for rice or for wheat or for whatever crop per acre, if you compare it with the government declared minimum support price or even the open market price, he or she is actually giving you at the rate of it's a negative price. He's not getting anything. Farmers of this country have fed the population for free all these years. But the government is talking about inviting investors. When Yediyurappa came, Mr. Chief Minister, from Davos, from the World Economic Forum, he said, the industrialists, they were complaining because our laws are very rigid. We have to relax our laws. For whom? So the question is, for whom? They have basically done it for the sake of the industrialists, for the sake of the investors. And why don't you calculate the investment done by the farming community of this country? Do you have you actually calculated the investment made, not just in the terms of money, not just a monetary investment, but in terms of his life. When he grows a crop, he's investing his life in that. When he loses an acre of maize or an acre of ragi, his whole year is gone. The cost, his education cost of his children, the health cost of his parents, or whatever other costs, everything is expected from that particular crop. So when that is gone, everything is gone. So why can't they understand? Why, it's not that they don't understand, but they are very clear. They have a very clear agenda that they are in favor of the capitalists. So that's very clear. And it's the time for people like all the sections of the society to understand this and come up with at least a minimum support to the farming community. Farmers should not be let feel alone anymore. So farmers have always battled alone. So now it's the time to say, we are with you. The urban middle class should come up and say, we are with you. The young lawyers should come up and say, we are with you. You have to just continue growing, and we will not let this happen, especially not in Karnataka, because this is a result of a long struggle, a long movement, led by Mr. Ganapati Appa, Mr. Shantveri Gopal Gowda. At times, Dr. Lohia, used to come and support this movement. And this is a land of struggle. This is a land of Basavanna and, Akka Mahadevi, and who actually fought for the equality. We needed a reform in the Land Reforms Act. We need an amendment. We had to look at the kind of perhaps we had to actually reduce the ceiling because our population has grown up. We have not given, even today, as Mr. P.T. Venkatesh was saying, given rights to our forest dwellers, our Bagalukum farmers, our tribes and the Dalits. And what about women? In the whole narrative, women are already or always disappeared. Our own women are not given titles. Women are not even considered as farmers. If you actually look at the statistics of the farmer suicides, the National Crime Record Bureau, they have given a statistics of 3.75 lakh people, lakh farmers have committed suicide. So in these statistics, where are the women? So they haven't considered many women who have committed suicide as farmers just because they don't have title deeds in their name. Though, very romantically, everybody says that 80% of the agricultural work is actually done by women. Women have always received this token in this country. But when it comes to rights, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody, it's, oh yeah, you are the Devi Ma, you are Durga Ma. But when you actually want to give them rights, instead of giving them rights, you are taking all the rights and giving it in the hands of few people. So I don't want my state to become like Brazil. Brazil, when you look at, the statistics, 80% of the land is in the hands of 5% of the population. So this is definitely not, we can't afford this to happen in Karnataka. And we will definitely, they are holding a session. The assembly will commence from the 25th of September. That's what we heard. And all these legislations will be tabled there. And we will see what will happen. We don't even, we can't even trust the opposition party, because we have not heard anything from the so-called opposition parties. They all welcome this land in their heart. And except Mr. Sidramaya, we haven't heard anybody commenting about this even. So this increases our responsibility in the street. Whoever in the street, this definitely increases our responsibility. And this is not just to ensure the rights to the farming community, but this is to ensure the food sovereignty of this country. Because the Indian government is getting into different bilateral free trade agreements with, with European Union, with the United States, and so on. And recently, RCEP, just before the Corona crisis started, they are almost to open for RCEP. Of course, from the Thailand summit, the Prime Minister walked back, but recently we have heard one of the ministers, I don't remember who is that we have to keep a window open in RCEP. So if that is going to happen, it's going to just, kill and the small dairy farmers that we have, especially the women, because dairy sector in Karnataka is in the hands of women. In India, it's in the hands of women and the small farmers. So they want to import all the genetically modified maize from the United States and highly subsidized agricultural products, food grown through corporate agriculture. When you talk about agriculture in the United States, Walmart is doing agriculture, not a farmer. Just 1% of the farming community is engaged in agriculture, and they are fighting for their own survival. They survive because of high subsidies, with unimaginable subsidies that they have been given. But whereas in our country, all sorts of subsidies have been taken away, and now whatever they had, we had in as part of agrarian system, our seeds have been taken away. Our knowledge has been destroyed because of Green Revolution technology. If you talk to the young farmers in the rural areas, they don't know what to grow, when to grow, how to grow. They have no idea. They have lost the traditional knowledge of growing in harmony with nature. So whatever they are doing, they are doing against nature. So everything has been lost. So whatever was left was a piece of land, below our feet, and that is also, they are also interested in this. And how can we let this happen? Where will this community go? This is a question that bothers, and it should bother all of us. Where is the alternative? They are not talking about any kind of alternative because they have no alternative. They don't have an alternative. They just want to make them as workers in their own land. The farmers have to sell their land. Exactly what we saw in the last climax of Do Bika Zameen. They will have to end up working as the watchmen or the workers of their own land. So, so this is where we are, and we can't afford to let this happen in this state. And then we'll definitely come to to the country. We should definitely make alliances. Without alliances, it's not possible to build anything. So, and at the same time, we have to perhaps get ready for stopping all kinds of acquisitions. So that's exactly what we are doing from KRRS. That as soon as they announced the amendments, we took a decision that we will establish boards in front of our villages. That we are farmers and no land is for sale. No, the land is for food production and is not for any industrial not to set up any industries. So no capitalists, no land grabbers are welcomed in this village. So that is a campaign that we have given a call for, and every day in one or the other villages of Karnataka, our activists are setting up these boards, and wherever the chief minister is going, wherever the district in charge ministers are going, activists of KRRS are showing them black flag, and they are stopping their vehicles. They are shouting slogans against this anti-farmer law. So the struggle is taking momentum, but it will definitely take some more time for people to actually understand. There are many people who don't even know what has happened. So awareness building is part of the whole work that we have to do. And so we are working with farmers, and you are working with the middle class and the educated young people, and we should come together. Yeah, that's all I would like to say. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. If I've taken more than what it was supposed to be, I'm very sorry. Thank you.
Not at all, ma'am. I think it was wonderful just listening to you take us through the extent of the current agrarian crisis and what that means for farmers in the country today, and why all of us, should not treat this issue like it exists outside of us, but treat this issue like it genuinely affects all of us. And like you had mentioned, this is not just an issue that concerns farmers' rights or one particular community's rights. This is a question of our food sovereignty. This is a question of food security in this country, and this is an issue that all of us have us taken, but a lot of us just don't seem to take into consideration. I had a question for you, ma'am, specifically with regard to what you had talked about, how there's already so much that's happening in terms of weakening the farming sector. There's already so many issues that plague the sector. The last thing that was left was ownership of land, which now is thought to be taken away as well. Um, what do you see, ma'am, as the situation unfolding in the future, especially given how COVID and this current lockdown has further aggravated farm distress and has further deepened the agrarian crisis? Do you see a situation wherein farmers are going to be forced to sell their lands just to sort of, earn some amount of income, given the kind of reduction in, the kind of crisis that we're facing under lockdown as well? Do you see that there's going to be a series of distress sales of land happening now that the government has made it easier, for non-agriculturists to purchase these lands as well?
Well, first of all, COVID has definitely worsened the situation, but has actually not started any crisis in agriculture. So agrarian crisis has always been there. COVID has just upheld it. So this just made it visible that there is a serious crisis. And distress sale, perhaps yes, in some places wherever the organization is not strong, it can happen. But that is why it is very essential at this time of juncture, to say that to tell the farmers that we cannot lose the land. We cannot lose our land just because there are amendments. There are many buyers. All of a sudden, we have seen in Belgaum district, in one village, just 3-4 days of after the amendments were announced, they had even sent executive orders and so on to the DCs. 900 acres of farmland was actually bought by somebody, or there was even an effort. I don't remember it rightly, but there was an effort to purchase 900 acres of land in the district of Belgaum. So there are a lot of possibilities that there will be distress sales, but this is the time also to build alternative markets. So this is exactly what we are trying to do, that we have to establish our own marketing system where there are no middlemen, and encourage the farmer towards natural farming. So natural farming, which is self-sustainable, which is debt-free, which you can have completely ecological farming without any input, any chemical input. So we have to build positive models. So that's exactly what as Amrit Bhumi we are engaged in. And we are seriously working with a group of volunteers who have come here who are working on, who have basically left their IT professionals and so on, or they want to move towards agriculture. And this is the kind of engagement that we have, that farmers alone cannot build their own market. We need a technical team to support them. So what kind of a model that we can build? And when you actually make agriculture viable, farmer will not sell his land. And these are the models that we have to amplify. We have to, build these models in every taluk, in every district, and show that agriculture is not an unviable profession. You can actually generate employment, not just grow food, but when you actually get into value addition, food processing, marketing, you can actually generate a lot of employment in your own village, and grow food for your own village, or for your own taluk, not for Chamarajnagar farmers growing food for Kerala people or Tamil Nadu people. They also have their land and they should also grow. We are not against growing food for anybody, but first we have to feed ourselves. These are the kind of models that we have to amplify, and this should go hand in hand. Sadly, the people who are in the struggle part of politics, they are not engaging with the constructive part of politics. The people who are part of constructive politics, they are not part of the struggle politics. So there is a gap. So we have to build that gap, and we need fresh ideas, fresh minds, and energetic young people like you to join this kind of efforts.
So I think you have to unmute your mic.
Yeah. You see, the important aspect that need to be looked into is that, India, according to its own statistics, nearly more than 70% of the population is associated with agriculture. Agriculture is the livelihood, it's life, and they don't have anything else to do. They can't do anything else other than that. So when you look at people like us who live in urban spaces, we are for consumers. Most of us are consumers. So most of the every entire population of this country is a consumer for this particular produce. Is concerned what is produced. We should be extremely concerned about the well-being of these people. It's essential. Now you see, look at this. You go to an employment in a factory. We say we have a law relating to minimum wages. Yes, minimum wages is required. I need my travel allowance. We demand all these aspects. We seek protections. We have insurance, personal life insurance, education insurance, health insurance. You name, we are creating so much of things for this particular middle class and employed class which we have. Such amount of protections are being sought in this particular process. But whereas you look at the farmer, he is virtually unprotected. No, what exactly we do is that if at all we say that there is a government hospital to go, the quality of services which are given to him, he is the person who is a guy, who's a person who is giving us the food. He's the breadwinner for us. He's earning for us. He's doing for us. And he's doing so at much lesser price. He does not have any minimum wage for his work. He does not get any support price for his produce. Many a time he loses. We have umpteen instances where the produce being thrown to the roads because he is not getting the price. We just look at it. We just don't even think in terms of what exactly is the crisis he is going through. Government miserably fails in this aspect. No one wants to support this because they don't want him to hold on to the land. They don't want him to continue in the land. The whole construct is that we would like to be in a model like Brazil or Bolivia or any other country or America, where the farming is bereft of farmer. Farming is bereft of farmer. That's the way we are looking forward. And these laws which we're talking in terms of are towards that kind of a situation. And this would make it impossible, because today we look into the kind of produce we are talking. When Chuki is talking about the kind of healthier product we are talking in terms of the GM products, genetically modified food which are being pushed through are being going to be produced in this particular lands. Large holdings, as she was explaining, people are now on the run to buy that, where there is a chase to purchase this particular land. The farmers are in distress. As such, they are in distress for decades because the state has miserably failed in protecting them. Now they want to bring in this kind of a law where this is the right time where the farmer can be reduced to nothing and has no voice. I think while there are struggles are happening, this is something each one of us need to resist, that our breadwinner is protected. Our breadwinner is someone who is going to protect us, not someone else. It's important. And if we say tomorrow that the entire agriculture operation is going to be mechanized, nearly close to 1 billion population is going to be unemployed, what is going to happen to this country? Can you ever imagine 1 billion unemployed population? Can you think in terms of that kind of situation? What would happen to us? Where would we go? What would be the situation we'll face? What's the kind of crime rate that will happen? Now, the state has a responsibility to see that the people in the farming community continue to be farming so that this space is provided. In fact, the only area in that international studies have shown post-COVID, only field which is going to be really successful in the whole world is going to be the agriculture and agrarian population. It's going to be the only community which is going to survive comfortably, because all the other businesses are lost. Whether it's your aerospace industry, whether it is manufacturing industry, you name the industry, they are in severe distress and they have lost. You have this minus 23% GDP in India. We have reported just day before yesterday, the kind of thing which have come down to. At this time, the only saving grace is agriculture. Now that is being destroyed because this is the pie which is available now. So the government wants to take this pie. This is something which needs to be stopped. If you want to take this away, in that it's going to affect you and me. It's going to affect all of us. Our incomes are already going down. Nearly around 20 million people have lost their job in last few days. That's the kind of situation we are in. Such a condition, this law is creating much more serious problem. It's going to create much more larger feudal lords because they are waiting. The rich landlords, the politically influential person, due to lots of corruption which they have made, have money to purchase the same. In fact, we are going back on see, land reforms is not something which is a gift of law. Land reforms is a struggle people have fought for ages. They have blood and sweat in this law is concerned. It was enforced upon the state. People have worked for decades on this, whether it's Inam Abolition Act, Village Officers Abolition Act, whether it is Land Reforms Act, every aspect of it, or Prohibition of Transfer of Certain Lands Act. I can recite you a long list of statutes which have come because of the struggle of the movement. And even as on this day, we are still fighting for these kind of changes. Much more changes that need to be brought in to make it possible for a good number of farmers to make a living. Now, at this juncture, when we have to move towards more land being made available to the farmer, even that last farmer who is without land, that landless labor, he needs to be provided kind of space. When we are to work towards that, we are trying to kill this particular law to meet the demands of someone in the industry, to meet the demands of someone in the upper caste, some meet the demands of somebody who is a former feudal lord. And this is something which is not acceptable to anyone. It should not be acceptable to any of us. Most of us have gone through this kind of tough times. We have struggled and we have come to a situation where we have some degree of comfort here. We have earned it. That man has been struggling for centuries, and we could not succeed even to a smaller degree, even as on this day. Even as on this day, if anything goes wrong, he has to talk in terms of Narega for the purpose of this 100 days wages. Why should he be? Why should we be looking at that kind of a situation in this country? Why should the farming community be poor? Why should farming community be without shelter, without roof, without food? Why should they migrate to cities? In a good lot of them, you are talking in terms of today, migrant labor are persons who hold piece of land in villages. They have come to cities. They have been security guards in our apartment. They have been working in our factories. They have been working in our malls. They have been working on the roads which we have. People drive our cars. They have been working in every place. All these people come from farming community, be it as farming labor or be it as a small farmer. Indian agriculture is made of 86% of small farmers. That I think we should remember that. By bringing such law, the farmer, small farmer is already choked. His life is made more miserable with this kind of present conditions because want of any support from the state, be it in seed, be it in fertilizer, be it in pesticides, be it in implements, be it in water, be it in electricity, you name, every aspect which he is associated with is being affected by very draconian state policies. And such kind of situation which he is already in distress, he's producing it for us for free because he's not getting a penny out of it. Somebody else is going to make money out of it. And now you want to hand the entire lands to two persons, one who is a big landlord, who is not going to do the agricultural operation, but will employ the same farmer as a coolie. Two, you are allowing a large mechanization of this particular agricultural operations with large holdings, and wherein that the farming community will be out of employment in totality. They have to die. The third, you are going to make one more dangerous thing possible. That holder is going to be the producer. The holder. This, in fact, Chiki was talking in terms of the largest farmer in US happens to be Walmart. That's the holder. He is the holder. The holder is going to be the farmer. So he is going to fix terms to us, what I eat, what I get. Today, sitting here in my house, I can think in terms of getting some 10 varieties, 20 varieties, 40 varieties of rice. Choose. I can make a call. I want Raja rice. I want Rajmudi. I want Sona Masuri. I want a brown rice. I want a black rice. I want red rice. I can keep on asking the kind of variety of rice. I want it without pesticides. I want without being fertilizers. I try to natural fertilize. I can claim all those things because they are being produced by the small farmers today. They are doing it, and I'm going to get all that. It's a luxury which I enjoy at this point of time. Tomorrow it will not be the case. Tomorrow, if you talk in terms of the kind of produce you're going to get, is that large producing, they want to produce the most. You have seen mad cow disease in Europe. You have seen American corn being root cause for increased incidence of cancer. You are going to get that in this country. A country of 1.4 billion population. Can you imagine that? What you're risking this kind of a situation for this farmer? This is something which we have been struggling to protect. The farmer is struggling to protect. People have struggled for decades to get this kind of rights to the farmer. You want to kill that entire law? You want to decimate that kind of entire law? I think the state should be protested against. The people should, all of us need to engage in this. It's not that it's not my issue. In fact, as Chiki was telling, that if there to be a farmer strike which happens in city, I'm going to have a traffic jam and my car is going to be stuck. I'll be late to my office. That's not the question. Have you ever thought what would happen to this particular farmer who is producing food for us? The moment you sit in the morning and open your breakfast, it's what he produced. You have not produced anything out there. You can't do that. You don't have anything to do. You don't have no clue. You have no idea. You're absolutely unlettered, illiterate regarding production of food is concerned. So you should know that your absolute insignificance in respect to production of food is concerned. You're only a consumer. So therefore, the producer, you need to respect. As you expect respect for your work, how much respect you should provide for the person who is going to produce it for you and for a pittance. And if you look at the kind of price which you pay For the products, I am paying a heavy price, you say that. Yes, I pay 100, some product which I buy, I pay 100 rupees a kilogram of rice. Is that money going to the pocket of the farmer? No. He is going to get only that small fraction of money that's not even going to be the cost of his production. And I am not concerned about it. I pay 100 rupees and I want a nicely packed material at my doorstep to come. That's what I do. So many of us do that. We never ever think in terms of what he goes through. So long as we don't care about him, we are risking ourselves into a very difficult situation. We should not do that. If we are paying 100 rupees, if I'm paying 100 rupees a kilogram of rice today, tomorrow if the holder becomes a producer, he will dictate terms. He may ask me to buy it at 40 rupees, or he may ask me to buy it at 500 rupees a kilogram. I may have to. It depends upon his whims and fancies, and he's not going to produce. He's going to bring in so many aspects of things. Today, there is genetically modified food is being resisted across the globe. And if we don't protect the farmer, genetically modified food would become the norm. Not only food, now genetically modified chicken, genetically modified sheep, genetically modified beef, genetically modified every kind of farming food. Your milk, it's going to be impacted by this, and it's going to be, you are going to consume poison. As such, you are consuming poison. You're going to consume only poison, nothing else. I think that we are going to get into if we don't support the farmers. There is a need, there is a duty for us to support the farmers. There is a need and duty for us to oppose this kind of land laws which are being brought in, where the rights of the farmer are going to be taken away. That should not be allowed to happen. This is a law which protects the farmer, where there is a possibility that he can engage, produce something better, where we can support, develop support system where we can produce a better product. He gets a better price, at least some respectable price. Why should the farmer wait for support price all the time? We are looking at survival. Every day he produces food for us. He is asking for a price which is going to survive him. And someone who has not raised the grain of cereal is going to fix the price of the support price, not the farmer. How is that it's happening in this particular country? Is not a crime that we are committing as against him. It's not a great crime that we're, as on this day, we're still committing a crime. And add to insult to the injury, you want to make the land bereft of a farmer and make him into a coolie or nobody else out there. Where is he going to go? What's going to happen to him? What would happen to our spaces? Your spaces are going to be at risk. You also should know that. If 1 billion population of this country becomes unemployed because you have taken away the lands from them for the corporates and the rich landlords who have no clue of agriculture, which hand over to the companies for, they are looking at cooperative farming. They are looking at not cooperative, they're going to be corporate farming. So if it's going to be corporate farming, that's going to kill all the more. And we are moving towards such situations, which is going to be so detrimental to the interest of this country. And it's time that the state, which is absolutely unmindful of this kind of change. In fact, this is the policy which we are talking in terms of the kind of land reforms. We used to hear about it way back in the 90s, that India needs to make land reforms. I said, we already have a land reforms. I told to a lawyer friend of mine. He said, no, Professor MD, and his photograph is right behind Chiki. Professor Indian said, you don't understand what land reforms which World Bank wants. Land reforms which World Bank is talking in terms of is that the land to be owned by a corporate, not by the farmer. That's the land reform which World Bank wants. That's the land reforms which the developed countries want, because they feel that the land is not available for them to produce. They want all this particular land because there is a huge market in India for products, because there is 1.4 billion population to be fed. It's a huge market for food products are concerned. It's a market which they want. That market they want to acquire only when they have a hold on this land. Land is not in their control. They want the land reforms. Land reforms is making land bereft of the farmer. This is something which they want to do that. And at this particular time, if our government talks in terms of creating spaces for that corporate farmer, make that spaces for that feudal lord, it's a pretty heady, poisonous combination of a feudal lord who is going to acquire the lands and make life difficult, and a corporate landowner who is going to acquire the particular lands. We talk in terms of any other thing which we say, no, it's not going to happen. It's going to be only a marginal change. No, it's not going to be a marginal change. It's going to be devastating for this particular state is concerned. It's time that the people need to fight against it. All of us need to join hands in this particular aspect. If we don't do that, I think we're committing a crime to ourselves. If you say that this is India, if you say that India is a large, if you have great respect for India and its culture and its all these aspects, its culture, its traditions and all those things mean agriculture. It only means agriculture because everything flows from it. You talk in terms of your religion, you talk in terms of anything. It all starts with agriculture. It all starts with farming. It all starts with animal rearing. It all starts with the history or mythology. Every aspect of it is associated with it. So you want to destroy that. And if you destroy that, what's that you're claiming to be an Indian culture? What's going to be Indian tradition you're talking in terms of? All these aspects are woven into the very whole farming and agriculture in this country. I think that needs to be protected. To protect that, these kind of laws need to be resisted. These laws should not be allowed to operate. How can someone bring a law when the entire country is in distress by through backdoor, by an ordinance, without there being a notice, without there being a debate on this particular aspect? While opposition, in fact, Chiki was clear, said that why opposition does not speak of it. Why it does not speak about it? Because it is also the policies of this particular government. I think at this point of time, we should stop this kind of change that's happened. People are agitating across this state. I think we should add muzzle to it. We should add support to it. And we should go out and tell that we will oppose this kind of changes being brought. Our farmer should be protected. That's a duty cast on all of us. It's not something which as a privilege. You can't have privileges when you don't do your duties. So I think this is a duty all of us need to take responsibility. This is a thing which are secured with decades of struggle, sacrifice of millions. Hundreds and thousands of people have faced cases. They have fought tooth and nail. They have lost their lives. In fact, when you look at the construct we have, Chiki was referring to, more number of farmers commit suicide than your COVID cases. You should understand that. More people have died because of loans than COVID. You should understand that. More people have died due to starvation in the farming sector because of that particular aspect than your COVID. You should understand that. I think you should know these aspects loud and clear. It's necessary because this message is not coming to you. Reach Law is trying to reach that information to you. Because these kind of experts don't get space to address the issues. For example, you can't get Chuki in the mainstream media for simple reason. Mainstream media does not want her to speak because if she speaks, she is going to spill the beans. So therefore, we need to talk to these people. We need to get to these experts. We need to talk to these expertise, try to understand the kind of wealth of information, knowledge they are bringing, and the kind of issues that they bring in. I think these are times that we should challenge this law. This law should go. This law has no place in a sane society. This law has no place in a society which is built on a constitution. We are talking in terms of social justice. Social justice means ensuring equality of income, ensuring that equal space, ensuring that there is no labor, that everybody has hold some piece of land, cultivate some piece of land, makes a decent living because on that particular piece of land. I think we should be in a position to facilitate that process where the whole load on the economy is reduced, where I'm going to get good products at reasonable prices, healthier product for reasonable prices. If you want that as a urban middle class, you want that as an employee section, as you want that as the persons who are part of the society, we should be questioning this kind of amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I just like to conclude by, I don't think there's anything more I can add to what both of you have said today. I just like to conclude by thanking both of you for just giving us your time and um, just sort of educating virtually a lot of us who seem to be unaware about the real consequences of this current agrarian crisis and the added consequences of governments that don't seem to care and actively want to disenfranchise millions of people virtually. So thank you for today's discussion. I hope it's been educate. It's been educating for me. So I hope it's been equally educating for everyone who's been watching today. And like both of you have already made impassioned pleas regarding, how none of this can work unless all of us actively resist laws like this and all of us speak out against this and make a big issue with regard to what's happening. I think we in the beginning of the discussion also we started off by talking about how there are already people writing in favor of this ordinance, like as if this is something that's heralding some wonderful reform and change. So I think just completely changing that narrative is something that we require today. Thank you, and to everyone watching, I suppose we'll see you all next week.
Thank you very